Hey, what's going on YouTube? So today I wanted to do my updated final predictions for the top 25 at the end of the year. So right before the season started, I actually did a prediction video on what I think the final top 25 is going to be for this year, just based on like my original conference predictions, and just basically a fun way to figure out what I think the final AP top 25 is going to be after it's all said and done. So yeah, let's go ahead and start with the 5 outside. So at 5 I got Temple, 4 West Virginia, 3 Utah, 2 Arizona State, and then 1 Florida. So I think Florida's going to have a strong year, a lot better than they normally do. I think Jim McElwain has them on the right track. They have a very strong defensive backfield, led by Jalen Tabor and Vernon Hargraves, that I think will be able to win them a few games. I do think they are the second or third best team in the SEC East, behind Georgia and then maybe Tennessee. The SEC is weaker than normal. I don't think Mizzou's that good this year. Don't think Matty Mock's going to be near consistent enough. Just pretty much his career has gone on. Excuse me. It seems like he's gotten more and more inconsistent. So, yeah, I think that Arizona State is going to have an up and down season. I can see it maybe an 8 or 9 win team, but they're in a very deep and tough Pac-12 South. League that's about 4 or 5 good teams deep. So Utah, same situation as Arizona State. I think they're a good team, but as long as Travis Wilson's out, I think they're going to have a tough time. They got a big game at Oregon this weekend that I think is going to start a little bit of a downward spiral for them. They are a good team. Devontae Booker is one of the better running backs in the country, but I think they're going to start getting exposed playing some of these top 20 teams. West Virginia, I really think they got a really good team this year. They were really underlooked heading into the season this year. Good defense, offense that was underrated heading in. A good quarterback in Skylar Howard, Javon Durant. Leads a good young wide receiver crew as well. I think Morgantown's one of the toughest places to win this year. They will definitely win some games that they shouldn't, a lot like they did last year. And I do think they're going to lose some. I think they're going to lose some games away from home that's going to knock them out of the chance of finishing in the top 25, though. And then finally Temple. I think that Temple's going to do good enough to maybe get a 10 or 11 win season. Basically do good enough to be one of the top 3 or 4 non-Power 5 teams, and yeah, also just finish outside the top 25. So moving to the top 25. At 25 I got Memphis. Memphis had a big win against Bowling Green last week. I think they're going to continue their success in the American Athletic Conference. Memphis had a big year last year with a 10-win season. I think that they're just going to continue the success again this year. They do look very good again this year. 24, I've got Wisconsin. So Wisconsin's just kind of rebuilding year for them. 24 is not a bad finish for them considering how top-heavy the Big Ten is this year. It looks like the Big Ten is very much a 4-team league. I think teams like Michigan, Penn State, if they can get it together, Minnesota can compete. Iowa looks good as well. But I think that Wisconsin is still one of the top 3 or 4 best teams in the conference. Hopefully Corey Clement will get it together. Joel Stave's been playing pretty good too. But I do think that they're going to end up with about 2 or 3 losses in Big Ten play, maybe even more. And I don't think that's going to be enough to land them anymore inside the top 25. So next one is Stanford. Stanford is starting to look a lot better after losing week 1 to Northwestern. Northwestern's also looking like a solid team, so it's not looking that bad. I think Kevin Hogan kind of finally woke up, but I do think they'll hold their own decently inside Pac-12 play, maybe a 9 or 10 win season, and land them right about where they are ranked right now. Next one is BYU. So I think BYU has a pretty much more relaxed second half schedule, facing a lot more AAC teams, non-Power 5 teams. So I think they'll be able to cruise through, get a couple of wins, and with the strength of the wins they had in their first 2 games, I think that'll be enough to land them inside the top 25. And I think a lot of people do respect BYU this year, seeing what they did after Taysom Hill went down. So next one is TCU. So I know a lot of people are going to be surprised by this, having TCU so low, but the Big 12 is a lot deeper than I think most people thought it would be. TCU has some very tough games on the road, and starting this week against Texas Tech. I'm not saying they're going to lose to Tech, but TCU is going to be on upset alert a lot. They've got a very vulnerable defense now, and it looks like they're just putting too much weight on Trevon Boykin's shoulders. I think they're going to end up losing. Again, this might sound a little bit crazy to some people, but maybe 2, 3, even 4 games inside the Big 12. That Baylor game is going to be tough. Baylor can put up points like no other, and with the amount of defensive injuries to TCU right now, obviously it's going to be hard for them to slow them down. I think Oklahoma State's going to be a tough game for them. OU is going to be a very tough game for them. OU was even tough for them last year. Texas could be a tough one, especially with the way Gerard Hurd's looking. So I think it's going to be tough for TCU to pull off a conference win this year, to pull off a conference championship this year. So move on to UCLA. UCLA was dealt some pretty bad injuries these past 2 weeks, including Miles Jack out for the season. I think that's a really devastating blow for UCLA. They are pretty deep on both sides of the ball with the amount of returning starters they have, but they've also had a number of injuries to that defense. Josh Rosen, I think, is going to have an up and down season. He's a very talented freshman. I think he will have an overall good season. But he's playing in a very, very good Pac-12 South with teams like USC, Arizona State, Arizona, Utah. I don't think that UCLA is going to be able to have the continuity to pull off a conference championship this year. Next one at 19 is Navy. So if you guys saw, I was really high on Navy coming into the preseason, or coming into the season, and I'm still that way. This is maybe a more realistic prediction, but Navy's run through their schedule so far, which is only, I believe, 2-3 games, but they had a pretty impressive win against East Carolina last week. Keenan Reynolds looks as advertised, just picking up where he left off last year. The American Athletic Conference doesn't. A lot of the teams that were supposed to compete, the UCFs, Houston, Cincinnati's, don't look as good as they were supposed to. So I think that it's going to be a good year for Navy. They could probably pull off a conference championship, and yeah, I think they'll definitely be able to finish inside the top 25. So at 18, I've got Oklahoma State. So I think Oklahoma State does have what it takes to to finish third in the to finish top 3 in the conference. A lot of people do. A lot of people had them pick as the dark horse to win. If not, then maybe inside the top 4. I think they've got a very, very favorable schedule in November. They get TCU, Baylor, and OU at home. I don't think the OU game really matters where it is. If you guys have looked at the recent history, then really the favorite or the home team in that game really means nothing. OU was the favorite last year. OSU won. OSU was the favorite the year before, and they had it at home, and OU won in the last second. So I don't think that really matters too much. I think they're going to be pretty evenly matched heading into this year's game, seeing what's happened this season already. I do think Oklahoma State's going to be a 9 or 10 win team this year, and will definitely be on the way up in 2016. But I don't think this is going to quite be the year for them. All right, so move on to 17. They're a little bit down right now, but I think they will definitely pick it up. At 17, I've got Tennessee. Now, this Florida game this week is going to be very telling. Tennessee can win, then that kind of shows that they've matured. They've finally got that monkey off their back, showing that they can finally win these big games against teams they haven't beaten in 10, 12 years, the Alabamas, the Floridas of the world. And I think that'll be a good sign that they're well on their way to being able to compete in the SEC East again, being able to compete just on a national title basis. I think that they're finally on the right track. Joshua Dobbs is definitely a change of pace quarterback for them. He's a lot better than anything they've had before. Their running game is the best I've seen it in a long time. Jalen Hurd and Alvin Kamara are both very good. Jalen Hurd's especially good. I think the receiving core needs to improve a little bit. The defense needs to hold strong. Needs to be a little bit more clutch. But OU's been looking very good, so I don't think that loss is as bad as a lot of people say it is. I think that loss, more than anything, just kind of showed that Tennessee still has trouble winning big games, but it also showed that they can compete in those big games now. So move on to 16, I've got USC. I think USC is going to be able to get it together a little bit better from that loss against Stanford last week. I think that they'll have a strong finish to the season, and this ranking's more based on hype for the following season than it is off the results from this season. I think USC could be an 8 or 9 win team, and maybe even I think they're more around 9 or 10. And if they do get to that point, they will definitely finish the year inside the top 20. So move on to 15, LSU. So LSU is vastly improved from last year. Pretty much all thanks to Leonard Fournette. He's been a stud so far, but you can't really base LSU or what LSU has done off a big win against Auburn. I mean, Auburn, it looks terrible this year, so I think that LSU is definitely going to be a good team, but I mean, it's the SEC West, deepest division in college football. they've got to play teams like Texas A&M, Alabama, Ole Miss, Arkansas if they can get it together, and Mississippi. Well, they already beat Mississippi State, so I think that LSU will probably be a 2 or 3 loss team this year, and but I do think they're headed on the way up. So next one is Georgia Tech. So Georgia Tech had a rough loss to Notre Dame last week, but I think they'll get it together with a win against Duke this coming week. Georgia Tech's still a very good team. I think that they're still going to finish inside the top 15 and probably be the third best team in the ACC. Move on to number 13. I've got Northwestern. So Northwestern, this looks a lot like 2013, where they get 3 or 4 big wins and then are ranked inside the top 20. Now for Northwestern, it's all about if they can hang on. They do look like they could be one of the better teams in the Big Ten this year, and a Big Ten that the middle of the conference is pretty weak. Penn State doesn't look to be as advertised, neither does Minnesota. Wisconsin looks like they'll be fine. Baylor, Michigan State, or not Baylor, Michigan State, Ohio State and Michigan State are, of course, looking as good as ever. But, well, Ohio State, if they can get it together, they should be fine. But I think that Northwestern is a team that if they can hold it together, then they could definitely be the third best team inside the Big Ten. And if they are a 2-loss team, because I really think the only 2 losses they'd be looking at are kind of like a Michigan State, Ohio State sort of deal, then I think they'll be fine. They'll be able to finish inside the top 15. So move on to number 12. I've got Oklahoma. So if you guys notice the way I have the rankings, it looks a lot like heading into bowl season for 2013. I think that OU is on the right track this year. Baker Mayfield, again, another change of pace quarterback that gives OU what they haven't had in a long time. That's a dual threat quarterback that has just the heart to win in clutch situations. Now, Trevor Knight looked like he could be that, but obviously was not last year. Incredibly inconsistent after the win against Alabama. Baker Mayfield kind of gives them what they need so far. Granted, aside from the Tennessee game, they haven't had much of a test yet. It'll be really telling in the coming weeks, playing against Baylor, TCU, and then finishing up the year against Oklahoma State. They do have Texas in a couple weeks too, but that game's kind of hard to gauge since it's such a big rivalry. I do think that OU is going to finish the year inside the top 15. Don't know if it's going to be quite their year yet to finish inside the top 10 or get a BCS bowl. Well, not BCS, New Year's Bowl. They might, but I do think they will be the second best team to finish the year, or second best team when it's all said and done in Big 12. So move on to number 11. I've got Oregon. So I think Oregon is the second best team in the Pac-12. Regardless if they have Vernon Adams, Jeff Locke, the offense is going to put up points. The defense doesn't look too strong, but it's hard for me to imagine Oregon finishing any lower than maybe third inside the Pac-12. The Pac-12 North, outside of Stanford, really isn't that strong. Washington doesn't look like they'll be really any threat to knock off Oregon this year. I'd say if anything, Stanford might. Excuse me. That's really it. Unless they get knocked off by a Pac-12 South team, then I think it's pretty much clear sailing for Oregon from here. They might lose one more game, and I think that could definitely happen. But even if they are a 2-loss team, they'll still finish right around, I'd say, 10 to 12. So moving on to number 10, I've got Florida State. So I think this Florida State team, the way they play kind of resembles last year. Obviously, they don't have Jameis Winston anymore, but the playing it close, kind of pulling away in the end, not looking consistent throughout the game, but like I said, still winning games. I think that Florida State will take care of most of their ACC opponents this year. I don't know if they are better than Clemson and Georgia Tech, but I do think that if they don't win the ACC, then they'll be the second best team, which should be good enough to get them inside the top 10 to finish the year. If not, then just outside. So number 9, I've got Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M is, even though they're rated pretty high this year, rated pretty high right now compared to where they were in the preseason, I think that they're still a little bit underrated. The defense is massively improved. The offense has got a ton of talent at pretty much every position. Kyle Allen's playing very good this year. Kyler Murray, even when he's been slotted in, looks pretty good too. The receivers look good. Christian Kirk looks like he's everything he was hyped up to be. Speedy Noyle's been good also. Trey Carson's been a monster at running back. Myles Garrett's been a monster on defense also. So I think that this is Texas A&M's year to finally I wouldn't say finally get back inside the top 10, but I think for the first time since 2013, I want to say that, but I do think they're going to finish inside the top 3 in the SEC West. which top 3 for a division doesn't sound good, but when you're in the deepest division in college football, that can normally land you inside the top 10, especially with the SEC buys. There's probably going to be 3-4 teams inside the top 10 to finish the year for the SEC. So move on to number 8. I've got Arizona. I'm back to thinking that Arizona is going to win the Pac-12. I think that they have what it takes. If they are able to beat UCLA this week, then I think that it'll be. I definitely won't say easy sailing from here on out, but I think the UCLA is going to be the toughest test for the rest of the year. The Arizona State game obviously is always going to be a big one. I believe that's a territorial cup, just because it's a rivalry. And Arizona State, they're not a pushover this year. They're still pretty good. Mike Bercovici looks good. They just aren't as good as a lot of people had them hyped up to be. I think that Arizona, once they get Scooby right back, if Anu Solomon can stay consistent, if Nick Wilson can carry the load on the ground, then I think that Arizona can definitely win the Pac-12. So move on to number 7. I've got Alabama. So Alabama did. Number 7. I've got Ole Miss. So I think that Ole Miss is not going to make it into the college football playoff. I think they will be the second best team inside the SEC West. I don't think that they're going to be able to get into the SEC championship this year. I think that's still going to be Alabama. But nonetheless, I think that Ole Miss is still a good team. I think they're a lot better than a lot of people had them hyped up to be, obviously. They're number 3 right now. A lot of people are talking about Ole Miss maybe being the best team in the country just by how much they've been beating opponents by. But I do think they have a couple more tough tests. Maybe they won't be able to get past. Mississippi State's always going to be a tough test for them. Texas A&M, I don't know if they're going to get past. LSU, but you never know until the season's over. But I still think that Ole Miss will finish the year inside the top 6 and make it to another New Year's Bowl. Now I've got a tie at number 5. So. At number 5. I didn't really, don't really know which one to pick yet. I just think this is going to be the SEC championship. I think it's going to be Alabama and Georgia, a rematch of the game that's happening actually next coming weekend. I do think that Alabama is going to come on top over Georgia, but I do think that Georgia is going to make it through every other SEC East test they have. I don't think the SEC East is near as good as it has been the last couple of years, and to be honest, for the last couple of years it hasn't been that good. I do think that Georgia's going to finish the year inside the top 5. Like I said, I don't really know who's going to win that SEC championship game yet. I do think that Georgia, if they do make it to the SEC championship game, then it might be a little bit different vibes for them. If they already have lost to Alabama in the regular season, I just have this feeling that Georgia would be able to pull it off, but at the same time, it's Georgia. You can never trust them to actually not choke. So I do think that it is pretty much a tie for them right now. All right. So at sorry guys, I've been screwing up these numbers completely. So just to give you guys a quick recap of the last 2 spots, I said Ole Miss at number 6. Definitely meant to have them at number 7. Alabama and Georgia are tied at 5. And then Clemson is at 6. So I do think that Clemson is going to be the ACC champions. Don't think that they're going to be able to make it into the college football playoff this year. I think whoever wins the SEC will make it in over Clemson. I mean, obviously it'll be a big debate this year if a one-loss SEC team is going to make it in over a no-loss ACC team. But I do think that Clemson's going to have a lot of close wins that kind of shows that they're not really good enough to be in the college football playoff. I don't think that if they made it, they'd be able to beat a team like Ohio State. Granted, 2 years ago they did beat Ohio State in a BCS Bowl. But I think the close win against Louisville kind of proved that while they will probably win a lot of games against good teams like Georgia Tech, NC State, Duke, I don't think that they're going to be able to make it into the college football playoff this year. I think that Clemson I honestly think they'll probably be a one-loss team if they do win the ACC, just because they do have to run through teams like Georgia Tech and Florida State. That's going to be tough for them to win both games. Both teams are extremely talented. Florida State is really inconsistent, but they're still good. Georgia Tech proved last week to me that, even though they didn't, to me Notre Dame proved more than Georgia Tech last week. I still think that Georgia Tech's a top 15 team in the country. But I don't think that Clemson's going to be able to make the college football playoff this year if they are a one-loss team. Maybe even if they are undefeated. So move on to number 4. So got Notre Dame. I think that Notre Dame will finish the year at 5. I think they will be a one-loss team this year. They'll probably end up losing a game like USC. A game like the USC game maybe. I think that Notre Dame's good, but all the injuries right now, I don't think that they're going to be consistent enough to go undefeated. Sorry, get hiccups. I think that Notre Dame's good. I think that Notre Dame's an extremely talented team, definitely a talented enough team to compete with any team in college football this year. The defense looks good. Will Fuller looks like a Heisman contender, one of the best wide receivers in college football. Deshaun Kaiser looks like he can do what needs to be done to be able to win games. Maybe not the best statistical quarterback, but definitely a good one at that. Especially since he was thrown into the fire after Malik Zaire got injured. But I don't think the Notre Dame's going to be able to finish the year in the college football playoff. The way things are looking right now, they definitely have the resume if they are able to go undefeated to make it into the college football playoff. But I do think they're going to end up with one loss. So move on to number 3. I've got Michigan State. So if you guys saw my college football prediction or college football playoff prediction video, it's either yesterday or 2 days ago. I had Michigan State in the college football playoff. Even if they are a one-loss team, I still think that'll be enough for them with the victory over Oregon. I do think if they lose to Ohio State, it'll be a very close loss. And I think if Ohio State kind of gets it together, starts getting some big wins, then that'll prove to people that Ohio State's still top dog, and that like a 2 or 3 point loss by Michigan State to Ohio State is nothing to keep them out of the college football playoff. So I do think that Michigan State will be in the college football playoff. I don't think that they would win in the first round. Right now, in the first round, I have Ohio State playing Georgia and then Baylor playing Michigan State. And I do think the first 2 seeds would win. And obviously that means that at number 2, I've got Baylor. I think that Baylor can finally do what it takes this year to win the Big 12 and finally move on to the college football playoff. With all the losses inside the top 10 right now, how it looks like the SEC is kind of eating itself up. I think that the SEC, no matter what, will send a team to the college football playoff. But I do think that this is the year the Big 12 will throw a college football playoff team in as well. I think that Baylor does have what it takes to go undefeated during the regular season. They got the offense that can put up the points as always. The defense can get it together a little bit better, and Seth Russell can take care of the ball just a little bit better also. I don't see a reason why Baylor wouldn't be able to win the Big 12. Looks like OU might be the second best team in the Big 12 this year. I'm not ready to take that title away from TCU yet. Obviously, I moved TCU down quite a bit in these rankings, but that's just going off premonition right now. I think that Baylor has proved that they can be a top 5 team year in and year out, but for Baylor, it's just about getting over the hump of finally making that college football playoff. Can't really say finally. It seemed like a long time just because of the process that the Big 12 went through last year, not having a championship game and not sending a team to the playoff, and it looked like they had 2 top 6 teams. So, do think Baylor can make it this year, though. Number 1, I've got Ohio State. So, for the time being, I think that Ohio State looked like the repeat champions. It looked like Alabama, maybe TCU would be able to dethrone them. Alabama right now, a one-loss team. If they can't beat Ole Miss, I don't think they'll be able to beat Ohio State. TCU with all the defensive injuries, I don't think they'd be able to compete either. So Ohio State, I still think is top dog. Like I said, until someone else proves that they are the clear-cut number 1, which I think could happen this year, but I don't think we'll see that for another few weeks coming. So that is my top 25 rankings. So like I said, let me clear up the 5 through 7 right quick. That was a little bit confusing. So I have a tie at 5 with Alabama and Georgia. I just don't know who's going to win the SEC yet. Just week 4. I'll probably have it figured out next week if I have a clear prediction. At number 6, I've got Clemson, and then 7, Ole Miss. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. I will post all the rankings description below, and yeah, that's pretty much it. See ya.